Welcome back to Le Podcast of Philippe. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that's been making a lot of headlines, Instagram's new accounts for teens. And we're going to be asking the tough question, are these really about protecting young users? Or is Meta maybe setting the stage for, a much bigger play in the world of online finance? We'll be dissecting those new features, trying to figure out if they really tackle the issue of teen social media addiction. And then we're going to explore this whole idea, is this Meta dipping its toes into the world of online banking? So before we get started, a quick reminder to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and hit that like button if you're enjoying the content. And for our French-speaking listeners, today's deep dive is on Explore Instagram et ses nouveaux comptes pour ados. Une bonne chose ou le début de la banque en ligne de Meta.
It's really fascinating. You know how Meta presents these teen accounts? On the surface, it's all about safety, privacy settings, parental controls. But I think we have to ask ourselves, is this just a really clever way to hook a younger generation of users? Especially when you look at, their bigger ambitions in the financial space.
Yeah, it's definitely raising some red flags. I mean, private accounts are a good starting point for sure. But how effective are they really when the algorithm can still be feeding teens potentially harmful content within their, limited network?
Yeah.
And then you have those parental controls. I mean, are those actually practical tools that busy parents can use?
Yeah.
Or is it more about, just kind of easing public concern?
Right, and I think that's where we really need to dig deeper. We can't just accept these features at face value, We need to understand how they fit into Meta's overall strategy. It's pretty clear they're aiming to be the platform for everything online, and that includes finances. I mean, they've already made it mandatory for shops on Facebook and Instagram to integrate payment methods. This is starting in April 2024 in the U.S.
Wow, that's a pretty big move. It's like they're building this closed system where users never have to leave, the Meta ecosystem. It sounds convenient on the surface, but it gives them so much control over data pricing, even which vendors get visibility. Imagine the kind of power they would wield if they became the main financial platform for an entire generation of teenagers.
Exactly. It's a bold move, and it raises some serious concerns. Let's not forget Meta's history when it comes to data privacy. Are they really equipped to handle the sensitive financial information of teens responsibly? And what about the risk of things like predatory marketing or even data breaches?
It's definitely a cause for concern. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a closer look at those teen account features. We need to see if they're actually strong enough to address issues like addiction and online safety, or if it's all just a shiny facade for something much bigger and potentially much riskier.
Okay, so let's break down some of these safety features they're talking about, like the, take a break nudges. On the surface, it sounds helpful, right? Encouraging teens to step away from the screen. But does it actually get to the root of the addiction problem?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's almost like, offering someone a glass of water when they're in a burning building. It might help for a second, but it doesn't solve the real issue. And what about those limits on late night use? Do we really think teenagers are going to follow those? Or are they just going to find ways around them?
It's tough to say how effective those features will be, in the real world. Teens are incredibly tech savvy. And let's be honest, they're driven to stay connected. It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. You know what I mean? You can't just add a few safety features to a platform that's designed to keep users hooked and expect it to magically fix the problem of addiction.
Exactly. And it brings us back to, Meta's financial ambitions. If they're so concerned about safety, why are they pushing so hard to integrate these financial services into the platform? It seems like those two goals are kind of at odds with each other. On one hand, they're saying they want to protect teens, but on the other hand, they're creating a system that encourages them to spend money.
Yeah, that's the real dilemma here. It's hard to reconcile those two narratives. Matthew Bergman, the attorney representing social media victims, he's been pretty outspoken about this. He argues that Instagram, by its very design, creates an addiction. And it leads kids down these rabbit holes of content.
Right. And he's not the only one saying this.
Yeah.
A lot of experts believe that you need fundamental changes to the platform if you want to truly combat addiction.
Yeah.
Just adding a few safety features here and there, it's not going to cut it. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Exactly. It's a superficial fix. It doesn't address the underlying cause. And when you consider Meta's financial goals, it becomes even more worrisome. Are these teen accounts a genuine attempt to protect young users? Or are they just a way to create future consumers?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They want to appear responsible and caring, but they also want to maximize profits. And those two things don't always go hand in hand.
Especially when you consider the potential for financial exploitation. Imagine teens constantly bombarded with targeted ads for products and services that they can buy with a single click. It's a recipe for disaster.
And what about the impact on their financial literacy? If teens are constantly exposed to this culture of, impulsive spending, instant gratification within the meta ecosystem, are they going to learn healthy financial habits? Or will they end up more vulnerable to things like debt and financial instability later on?
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, and what we really need to be careful about. But I think it's worth considering, the potential upsides too. Some people argue that by bringing financial services into these platforms, Meta could actually make online transactions safer and more secure.
Yeah, there's definitely a case to be made there. They certainly have the resources and the tech to put some pretty strong security measures in place. And let's face it, traditional financial institutions haven't exactly been immune to data breaches and fraud either.
True, but you have to admit the scale of Meta is just unprecedented. Imagine if their systems were compromised, the fallout would be huge. And then there's the whole question of transparency. Are they going to be open about how they're using our financial data? Will they allow for any kind of independent oversight?
Those are crucial questions, yeah. And honestly, their track record doesn't exactly inspire confidence. But let's try to look at this from another angle for a minute. What if they actually do this responsibly? What if they create a system that actually gives teens, tools and knowledge about finance while also protecting their data and shielding them from exploitation?
Well, that would be the ideal outcome, wouldn't it? A platform that actually promotes responsible financial behavior, while also making sure the online environment is safe and healthy for teens.
Yeah.
But can we realistically expect that from a company that's driven by profit?
It's a tough one to answer. It really depends on how they choose to implement and regulate these financial services. And in the end, it's up to us as users and as a society to hold them accountable. We need to demand transparency. We need to push for strong regulations. And we need to educate ourselves and our kids about the potential risks and benefits of this whole, digital world that's constantly changing.
Yeah, we can't just sit back and let this happen passively. We have a responsibility to shape the future of technology and make sure it's serving us, not the other way around. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
I agree. It's time to move beyond just talking about the problem. We need to start thinking about solutions. What would a truly ethical and responsible approach to teens' social media and online finance actually look like? How do we balance the need for innovation with the need to protect the most vulnerable users?
Those are the questions we all need to be asking ourselves. As individuals, as parents, as educators, as a society, the answers might not be easy, but the stakes are just too high to ignore. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.